Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take a stack of sources, articles, research, personal notes, and really just pull them apart to figure out what's going on.
We want to put it all together so you walk away feeling like you've genuinely got a handle on the topic.
And today, you've shared a source that is, it's truly unique. It's a deep, very thoughtful personal essay. The title is The Importance of Being Reserved, and it's by a writer named Thaddeus Mitchell.
Right. And our mission, and this is for you listening, is to go way beyond just a simple summary of this essay.
We're not just reading it back to you.
No, not at all. We are doing what we call an intellectual extraction. We're analyzing his argument for why someone should actively choose to be reserved, almost as a strategic position.
So it's a choice, not a personality trait.
Exactly. We're going to chart his own journey toward this belief. We'll pull out his core philosophy about human nature, and then we're going to dissect his very practical strategies for dealing with conflict.
It's like a user's manual for silence.
It's a social calculus of silence. That's the perfect way to put it.
Okay, and what makes this so compelling right from the start is the core idea that Mitchell lays out. This isn't just about, being shy or preferring to be quiet.
No, it's not introversion in the typical sense.
He takes reserved behavior and turns it into this highly sophisticated, you almost said military-grade strategic response.
It is. The central idea, and it's a provocative one, is that being reserved is rooted in a fundamentally cynical view of people.
Or maybe, as he would probably argue, a realistic one.
Perhaps. The view is that most human interactions, especially when there's conflict, are basically just, they're animalistic dominance displays. Predictable ones, at that.
Wow. Okay, so not just arguments, but like everyday conversation.
He suggests it underlies almost everything. We're not looking at a personality type. We're looking at a deliberate behavioral system built for observation, defense, and strategic clarity.
And it all comes from this belief that most people are just running on these primal, instinctual scripts.
And that reserving your full self is the only reliable way to keep your distance, to see things clearly, and ultimately, to stay in control when everything around you is social chaos.
Okay, let's unpack this journey then. He says this wasn't some sudden choice. He calls it an imperative part of my personal growth. So to get the philosophy, we have to start where he did.
Right, at the beginning. It's a long, slow progression toward silence.
And it all starts on the playground.
The foundation is the timeline, starting in elementary school. Mitchell makes it really clear that while all the other kids were, running around and trying to fit in, he was watching.
Observing.
Intensely studying them. He was analyzing the social behavior, their demeanor, how they talked. And this early habit is really the cornerstone of his whole philosophy.
Why? What did he learn?
It taught him that human behavior, even when it's, kids on a playground, it follows patterns, it's predictable.
And the way he talks about it is, it's not like how a kid would talk. He uses this really grand analogy. He compares himself to Charles Darwin observing the animals on the Galapagos Islands.
That analogy is everything. It's so crucial because it immediately frames how he sees the world. He's not part of the drama. He's the objective scientist.
And his classmates are the finches, the subject.
Exactly. They're subjects of a natural history study. He's not emotionally invested. He's just collecting data.
What kind of data?
He was focused on the mechanics of social success, how his peers use certain expressions or gestures or attitudes, what we probably call social performance, to become popular. He was literally mapping the social hierarchy.
And he categorizes the groups with this really adult language. He doesn't call them cliques.
No, he calls them clubs, gangs, or perhaps just a small group of friends in the same autonomous collective, depending on their attitude and philosophical viewpoints.
For elementary school kids.
It just highlights how systematic he was being, even back then. He wasn't just noticing who played with whom. He was trying to figure out the function of the group.
Now, what was the function?
Always the same, he concluded. To get respect, to show dominance, and to feel secure within their little community. So while all the other kids were just trying to belong, he was gathering intelligence on how belonging was performed.
Okay, so he's this passive observer, this little Darwin, but then something shifts in fourth grade. He goes from just watching to having a philosophy.
Right. He moves from being a data collector to someone who starts making strategic decisions based on that data.
And the trigger for this is so specific. It happens in music class.
Yes. And it's a great story. He says his mother introduced him to the band Rush, specifically the album Grace Under Pressure.
A classic.
And one track in particular, Kid Gloves. Mitchell writes, and this is a quote, that this album opened doors that helped mold me and turn me into who I am today. So this isn't a small thing for him. Art fundamentally changed his behavior.
What was the insight? What did he hear in that song?
He heard the lyricist, Neil Peart, basically spell out the necessity of being careful. Careful with your word, careful with your actions. He realized everyone is different. Everyone has their own beliefs. You have to be careful because their reaction can either be a good one or a bad one.
So he sees the social world as this minefield, basically.
It's volatile.
Yeah.
That's the word. He understood that this whole popularity contest he'd been observing makes people really vulnerable. Why? Because, as he says, they easily fall victim to the desire to be liked, regardless of the consequences.
So carelessness has a cost, a measurable cost.
Yes. The lyrics were like this external adult confirmation of the social chaos he'd already been charting on the playground.
But here's where the story turns. The event that really seals his fate, that pushes him fully into being reserved.
The conflict.
Right. He's so excited by this discovery, this philosophical truth he's uncovered about social cost, that he can't keep it to himself. He tries to share it.
With his fourth grade classmates.
And you can imagine how that went.
Total dismissal and ridicule. He writes, I was met with ridicule in just about every way possible. They didn't care about the lesson. They didn't care about the band. They just laughed.
And that collision of his deep, genuine philosophical effort meeting their, shallow mockery, that was it.
It was traumatic for him. It proved in his mind that engaging meaningfully with most people it carried an immediate, painful price.
So this is where we have to pause and ask that question, right? Is his philosophy of being reserved really a philosophy? Or is it just self-preservation, a defense mechanism built around a childhood hurt?
That's the tension that runs through the whole essay. The playground gave him the data. People are driven by dominance. The music class incident gave him the imperative. Sharing your real self is dangerous.
And you put those two together.
And you get a formalized, highly critical, and very defensive philosophy about all human interaction. It's the moment he built the wall between his quiet internal self and the loud, hostile world outside.
And that wall, that leads us right into his core philosophical framework, which is, I have to say, the most radical and maybe the most cynical part of the whole essay.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting. He doesn't pull any punches.
No. He just sets aside any idea of human spiritual or moral specialness.
He cuts right to a biological reductionist view. His exact words are, as human beings, we are merely animals with a complex brain.
I mean, that's a bold statement.
It is. His argument is that even though we're at the top of the food chain, we are, quote, no better than any other species. We just have more sophisticated tools to act out our primal drives.
And he says you can see the proof everywhere.
Yeah.
When you're socializing in the real world, and especially
on social media, it's amplified there. That complex brain allows for amazing things for civilization, but it also allows for more complex and often more devastating, abrasive behavior.
He sees this constant mix of people, the civilized ones and the ones who are abrasive and obtuse.
And this is where that complex brain part is so key. The brain enables civilization, laws, order, waiting your turn. But it doesn't erase the primal drive.
The drive for status, for
territory.
territory.
Dominance, exactly. And then he tries to figure out why. Why do some people default to that abrasive, animalistic script?
And he links it back to childhood psychology, specifically something he calls the pleasure principle.
Right, which, for clarity, is a real concept from Freudian psychology. It's the driving force of the id, that instinctual, raw part of our personality that just wants immediate gratification.
Avoid pain, get pleasure now.
Right. And Mitchell believes it's just too easy for kids to get stuck there.
What does he mean by stuck?
Well, if you think about the Freudian model, you have the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is instinct, the ego is reality, and the superego is morality and social norms. Mitchell is basically saying that without proper guidance, without developing that ego and superego, a person who only operates on the pleasure principle,
he's in trouble.
He says there's a great chance we will turn into hedonists.
And for him, hedonism isn't just about seeking pleasure. It's more than that.
It's about acting purely on impulse. No foresight, no empathy, no thinking about consequences. So that abrasive, aggressive person you see online, by his definition, that's just an unchecked id, the unguided pleasure principle in action.
Someone who never learned to delay gratification.
Or to respect the fact that other people exist And that lack of structure makes them completely predictable. Instinct is always predictable.
And he thinks it's hard to escape that path once you're on it.
Very. He does mention a rare exception. Someone with a will so strong they can teach themselves to be civilized, even without good guidance early on. But he stresses that this quality is rare nowadays. So for him, the default assumption has to be that most uncivilized behavior is just predictable, impulse-driven hedonism.
Which, if you're the reserved philosopher, justifies keeping your distance. Why engage when you already know the script?
Exactly. And this whole framework, it needs its own language, right? Its own scientific-sounding terminology. And Mitchell creates it.
It's like he's classifying a disease.
That's a good way to put it. He names the state of acting like an uncivilized animal the inhumane condition.
The inhumane condition.
And the specific moment of regression, that instant where you slip from rational thought back to primal instinct, he calls that the anthropoidean slip.
The anthropoidean slip.
It's brilliant.
It's a fantastic term. It perfectly captures it. Think about road rage or a political debate online that just instantly becomes name-calling.
That's the slip. The complex brain just shuts off and the ape takes over.
That's exactly his point. And these behaviors, he's very clear, are all about dominance. People act out yelling, physical threats, online pylons to show dominance and gain respect, just like animals, he says.
So it all circles back to the playground.
It always circles back to the playground. So being reserved, in this view, is the ultimate refusal to even play that game. If the game is predictable, aggressive, and it requires you to commit your own anthropoidean slip,
Then the only winning move is not to play, or to play by a completely different set of rules. He frames reserve not as a flaw, not as shyness, but as a sophisticated defense against these pre-programmed animalistic scripts.
Okay, so that's the philosophical bedrock. Humanity is predictably primal. So then how do you translate that into action? How does this reserved observer actually handle it when the animal kingdom comes knocking?
Right, this moves us from the why to the how, his
Right.
practical strategy, and he anchors it to a very powerful historical figure.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes. The transition is seamless. He identifies so strongly with Roosevelt's famous maxim, speak softly and carry a big stick.
And that phrase allows him to connect being reserved with strength, not weakness.
Exactly. It's not about fear. Speaking softly is the reserved behavior in practice, but the big stick, that's the strategic part.
And his big stick isn't a literal weapon.
No. He defines it as his preference for being witty and clever over getting physical. So the big stick is his intellectual control. It's his understanding of the aggressor's predictable script. It's his calmness under pressure.
And he deploys this intellectual big stick most clearly in his strategy for dealing with an aggressor, someone who is very obviously in the middle of an anthropoidean slip and is ready for a fight.
Yeah, that person is looking for a reaction. They need you to engage, to yell back, to get scared. They need you to validate their dominance display and pull you into their script.
So what's Mitchell's counter move?
It's a nonverbal strategy, and it's brilliantly simple. He calls it the stoic stare.
The stoic stare. Okay, break that down.
The whole point is to intentionally break the aggressor's expectation loop. The method is absolute silence, an unmoving posture, and just a steady, stoic stare. You don't say anything.
So you're not giving them anything to work with.
Nothing. The aggressor is looking for anger or fear or submission, any reaction that confirms their power move worked. By giving them this neutral, non-responsive, ambiguous signal, you refuse to validate their script.
You're kind of weaponizing the unknown, aren't you? He says the immediate effect is that the aggressor backs down out of confusion or awkwardness.
It's a strategic imposition of ambiguity. The aggressor is using their little dominance display to gather data about their status compared to you. When you give them no data, they have to waste all this mental and emotional energy trying to figure out what's going on.
They're ready for a shouting match, but they get a chess player instead.
And that's mentally exhausting for them. It creates a tension they don't know how to resolve.
But he gives a really stern warning about this. You have to commit to it.
Absolutely. He stresses you cannot back down. Don't show fear. Maintain that stoic look. The second you break eye contact or look anxious, their dominance display has succeeded.
He says you should picture yourself watching a documentary on animal dominance on the television.
Because that is exactly the clinical distance he is trying to maintain. He is the scientist, they are the subject.
And from that clinical observation, he's identified 3 specific, predictable outcomes that he sees over and over again when he stays silent.
Right. And for him, these outcomes prove that the aggressor is just following a program, a script that burns itself out.
Okay, so what's the first outcome?
The most common one, probably. The antagonizer will run his or her mouth until they get tired.
They just run out of steam.
It's simple energy depletion. They are projecting all this emotional and verbal energy into a complete vacuum. There's no echo, there's no reciprocal energy to keep the conflict going, so the performance just runs out of fuel. It gets boring, even for them.
Okay, what's the second pattern?
This one is about the cognitive cost. The antagonizer will become confused and eventually walk away.
So the brain sort of re-engages.
Briefly, the confusion comes from that lack of validation. If I yell at you and you don't even flinch, my yell was meaningless. It creates this cognitive dissonance, this frustration of running your script perfectly and getting a null result. So they just disengage. Walking away is surrendering to the awkwardness.
And the third pattern is the most intense.
Mm.
But he still sees it as a win for the reserved person.
Yes. The antagonizer will physically strike in hopes to instill dominance, but will actually walk away with maybe a few cheers and a dented ego.
How is getting hit a win?
Because he completely reinterprets the physical act. He doesn't see it as a loss for the reserved person. He sees it as the ultimate failure of the aggressor.
The final, desperate move.
It's the complete surrender to the anthropoidean slip. The complex brain has failed entirely. The primal impulse has taken total control. And by not reacting in kind, the reserved person has maintained their own civilization, proving that the aggressor is trapped in that predictable cycle.
So the physical strike isn't a show of dominance. It's a public admission of intellectual failure.
And a loss of control. The cheers from the crowd might be temporary, but the ego is dented because they failed to break your composure. They couldn't make you slip.
He does add a really interesting counterpoint, though. He says in rare cases, a fight like this can turn into a lifelong friendship.
Which is fascinating. It suggests that maybe this process, this intense, non-reactive confrontation, can sometimes strip away all the performance and allow a genuine connection to form. It turns two animals back into two civilized people who respect each other.
He also says, ideally, you should try to ask the aggressor what their issue is, to appeal to that complex brain.
But he admits most people in that state are too standoffish and headstrong to give a real answer. The animal instinct is just too loud.
So this whole section is really a field guide. It explains how silence, the stoic stare, that composure, how that functions as the big stick.
It protects the observer, and it forces the aggressor to exhaust themselves on their own predictable, unvalidated routine.
Okay, so we have the philosophy, we have the strategy. Now we have to zoom out for the final analysis.
Yeah.
The social calculus of silence.
Right. And to his credit, he's very honest here. He knows this way of life isn't perfect. It has big benefits, but it also has significant costs.
He lays it all out, a real cost-benefit analysis for you, the listener. Let's start with the positives, the win column.
The first major benefit is what you might call cognitive superiority. He says he is easily capable of seeing and understanding my surroundings, especially when around other people.
When you're not talking, you're listening and watching.
Your entire processing capacity is dedicated to observing the environment. It goes right back to the Darwin analogy. If you're quiet, you're gathering the maximum amount of data about the social ecosystem. Who has the power? Who's insecure? What are the unspoken rules?
Silence isn't empty. It's maximum information bandwidth.
A massive strategic advantage in any social setting.
The second benefit is more about perception. He says, best case scenario, I am perceived as a really good listener.
Which is a nice side effect of just being intensely observant. People mistake your focused attention for deep, empathetic listening, even if you're mostly just analyzing patterns.
And that feeds right into the third benefit.
Exactly. He finds he is entertained by the stories of others who, as he very keenly observes, naturally want to be heard. People are always looking for an audience.
So by being the quiet one, he automatically becomes the person everyone talks to.
He becomes the repository for their need for self-expression. He turns his passive state into an active source of entertainment and, again, social data.
And then there's the final, what he sees as the ultimate defensive victory.
Eventually, I am perceived as misunderstood and ignored entirely. And he follows that with, hey, less drama for me.
That's the pinnacle for him. Strategic withdrawal.
If you're misunderstood and then ignored, you've basically been removed from the social contest. You've achieved a kind of operational invisibility. It's a powerful shield against the drama and the conflict he's been trying to avoid since 4th grade.
So being misunderstood is just acceptable collateral damage for avoiding the inhumane condition.
That's the calculus he makes.
But it's a double-edged sword. He's really quick to detail the negative side, the cost column.
And this is where you can start to see the potential for this worldview to become, well, misanthropic. The first major cost is the fear of the unknown that he creates in other people.
How so?
Because people can't read the silent person, they get worried, they think he is judging them harshly or you are planning an attack. He nails the psychology. People tend to fear the unknown.
So here's the paradox. He's being quiet to avoid a fight.
But his very silence can breed anxiety and hostility in others. By refusing to send clear signals, he isn't seen as peaceful. He's seen as a potential threat. It completely flips the script.
The second cost is tied to that one. Intimidation, which can trigger aggression.
Right. He realizes that the reserved person might come off as better than everyone else because of their self-control. And since most people want to feel smart and important, if they feel intimidated by your silence, they will start to show aggression just to restore their own sense of dominance.
So his attempt to deflect conflict can actually trigger the very animalistic displays he's trying to avoid.
Especially in people with fragile egos, it means he's constantly in this management scenario, not a state of total escape.
And the third cost is the most practical one. It's about community.
Exclusion. Plain and simple. The reserved person will inherently have the least say in group decisions. Sometimes, he says, they are not even a part of the decision-making process.
That's the price you pay for being silent. You lose your voice. You lose your agency.
You might see the whole conflict, you might know the best solution, but your input won't be valued because you haven't spent the conversational currency required to be heard.
Okay, so there's the full calculus. Benefits. Cognitive clarity, safety, less drama. Costs. You make other people anxious, you can trigger aggression, and you lose your say in things.
And his final judgment is firm. For him, the benefits outweigh the costs.
And he says it gets easier with age.
Crucially, he attributes his success to gaining more patience. This suggests the whole strategy is a long-term investment. You need immense patience to put up with the negative reactions and the exclusion.
But the older he gets, the more worth it becomes.
As the chaos of the Anthropoidean slip seems less and less appealing, and he wraps it all up with this one final piece of practical advice.
It is better and easier in most cases to just let people be the talkers in the room.
That's the definitive takeaway. If your goal is knowledge, reduced conflict, and deep understanding, then giving up the conversational floor is the superior strategy. He reframes talking not as connection, but as a currency others are desperate to spend.
Which the reserved person happily collects as valuable data and cheap entertainment.
Exactly.
This has been an incredible deep dive into a really rigorous personal philosophy. He builds his case so systematically, from the playground observations to the psychological framework, and then this very balanced cost-benefit analysis.
And if we want to summarize the core tension, it's that Mitchell believes we're always facing a choice. You can either use your complex brain to act in a civilized, measured way.
Or you can give in to primal instinct and act like an animal.
And he's adamant you cannot do both at the same time. The second you react with impulsive anger or aggression, you've committed the Anthropoidean slip.
Which brings us right back to today, to the modern world, which he says makes his choice harder than ever.
It's a critical observation. He notes that the world makes communication easier than at any point in history. We have social media, instant access to everyone.
Yet, people are more distant, even when we are standing next to someone.
That's it. The ease of communication hasn't built intimacy. It has just built new, bigger arenas for the dominance displays.
Social media lets you perform the Anthropoidean slip for a global audience with no immediate physical risk.
Which just accelerates the abrasive and obtuse behavior. So his philosophy of reserve is maybe more relevant now than ever in an age of constant digital confrontation. The cost of expressing yourself carelessly is still ridicule and drama, the same patterns he saw in fourth grade, just amplified a billion times.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If communication is easier than ever, but being reserved gives you clearer understanding and psychological safety from that Anthropoidean slip, what are we losing? What knowledge are we forfeiting when we always choose instant expression over strategic silence?
And let's push that even further. Is our modern cultural emphasis on free expression, where every single thought, every emotional reaction gets shared instantly, is that actually encouraging the inhumane condition?
Are we making it easier for people to slip?
By removing the need for thoughtfulness, by lowering the psychological cost of just acting on impulse, are we making it easier for people to devolve? Mitchell's entire argument would suggest that without real, meaningful social consequences for chaos, People revert to primal dominance displays faster and more often than ever before.
So we want to encourage you to try an experiment this week. Observe the social dynamics around you. Adopt that Darwin on the Galapagos mindset that he talks about.
For just a few days, try letting other people be the talkers in the room. If you find yourself in a tense situation, try the stoic stare.
And just see what happens. See if those predicted outcomes, the confusion, the energy drain, that immediate need for dominance, see if they play out exactly as Mitchell described.
Become the reserved observer, the scientist of the human condition, and start collecting your own data on the anthropoidean slip.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.